Good tidings and welcome to Anime Rewrite's 10 subscriber Christmas special. Or, if you're watching this when it's not Christmas, well, we're never more than 364 or 365 days in a leap year away from the next one, so it's practically the same thing. This is going to be a non-scripted video, and I just wanted to show my appreciation for everybody that has subscribed to my channel so far. I wish I could list everybody's name, but only certain profiles allow me to see who you are, but I do appreciate everybody simply subscribing, viewing. Comments are wonderful, and I do appreciate those as well, even more so in fact. But everything you do helps. What I would like to do today is expound on the connection, at least that I see, between Christmas, that is to say the celebration, the cultural tradition, not any particular religious association, and anime. Because ultimately, a big part of what Anime Rewrite is all about is to use not necessarily just fiction, but the ideas that comes with anime, obviously, but also just the inspirations that we get. And Christmas, regardless of your skeptical views on it, of course, many companies use it as an opportunity to push their sales and their products, yes, but it encourages people to arguably be the best versions of themselves. It encourages us to be good to each other for no reason other than 'tis the season. And if human history has proved anything, it's that you can't expect people to be that way year-round, year after year. But there is something powerful about a day that literally could bring two sides of a worldwide war to stop fighting. I'm referring to the Christmas day, I believe it was either an armistice or whatever term, when during World War I they simply stopped fighting. And while I'm not particularly educated on the details of it, they allowed each other to be brothers again. I say brothers rather than brothers and sisters, as I severely doubt that there were many women in the military at that time. But either way, it is a reminder that we can be better than we usually are. And all we really need is the permission to do so. The permission to be as we know we should, in our hearts, in our minds, however you want to say it, rather than what comes easiest. And I believe that anime very much does the same thing. As someone who raised himself on it, because I didn't have other points of view that could really convince me of whatever and didn't overwrite what I was deciding on my own, I found anime to be very concentrating. It's very useful, but very beneficial in setting my moral compass. Now, of course, they are very extreme in certain ways, but there are also very many gray areas. It's something that you will see a lot in anime, as I'm sure you're aware, is a moral gray area, an attempt to sympathize with the villains most often. And I think that is, again, connected with the spirit of Christmas in that you are just being good to each other to be good to each other. You're not judging them because they're different from you. which is something that I know that I do on a regular basis. I would be lying if I said otherwise. And I think it's something that most of us do. And whether you're talking about old Saint Nick, the cultural mainstream idea of him, I don't know about the man that inspired it or anything, or your favorite inspiring anime character, there's a lot that he shares in terms of inspiration with someone like Naruto or Goku or whoever, in that the character at their core is meant to inspire a greater expression of how we should be. I won't just give you a million details for something you can probably pick up on. It's just the good-naturedness that everyone should be able to have, and that unfortunately in this real world that we live in, we cannot practically be that way all the time. Or at least it is not always in our best interest to show our best nature. Now, of course, that varies depending on how you're expressing it, but something that I always enjoyed about Christmas is that whenever I watch a movie about it, and I mean not one of the horror movies or anything else that really tries to put a huge spin on it, the idea of it is that usually something goes wrong and then they have to save Christmas somehow, in some way. And at the end of the day, or night usually, there's a lesson learned about appreciating people for their own sake and not making it all commercial and such like that. And oftentimes in anime, it's similar as well. Whether you have a situation in Naruto where the villain is just obviously doing all these things and they have to be evil and that's it. And everybody's just trying to kill each other. But then eventually Naruto ends up in the position of power and he decides not to go through with that because he wants to make the world the way it should be rather than just winning. And I just mentioned Naruto because it's a popular anime. It's in My Hero Academia, you have Midoriya, who's always trying to do the right thing. In Bleach, Ichigo would try to understand his opponent's perspectives. And with Dragon Ball Z, for example, Goku wouldn't really look at many of his enemies really like villains. It was just, you want to kill the people of Earth, so I'm going to stop you. It was just as simple as that, just a matter of his priorities. And I believe that there's a big lesson to be learned from that, is that once you can look at another person as just another person rather than the villain of your life, then it becomes easier to show them the way that you would like to be if you didn't have to be afraid of being mistreated. So that's the first connection that I see between anime and the idea of Christmas, is to be able to look at people in a way that makes it easier for you to give yourself permission to be kind, to be the way that, in quotes, we know we should be. And another thing that I find inspires me about it is that with Christmas there's this sort of just feeling, this positive nature that's supposed to come from it, that hopefully you have personally experienced. I know that I have, even though I have spent many a Christmas alone. But I often find myself watching the Christmas movies and listening to the Christmas carols. Yes, I have no problem with the Christmas carols. I love them. I guess I've been fortunate enough not to work the jobs where you have to listen to it far too much. I would probably be singing a few of them while I'm doing this video if I didn't want to get a copyright claim from it. Another connection that I have with anime and Christmas is when I was younger, before I really had discovered anime, is I would watch Christmas movies really any time of the year to put myself in a better mood. It's just something that I fell back on. I personally came from a not only unpleasant but not very safe environment, and I won't bore you with the details, but it was something where I definitely needed an escape, particularly when you're smaller and you don't have as much of an ability to fight back. And Christmas movies were originally my outlet where that was concerned. And eventually anime became one of them as well, with, obviously, with the nature of anime rewrite, me getting invested in not only the storylines but also the inspiration that came from the different characters. And I believe that the perhaps indulgence is both the right word and not, of these idyllic, for lack of a better word, media to consume. It gave a sense of this is how things could be. Again, it ties back to the nature of how things should be, but less so in the manner of expressing it towards others and just as an expression myself or experience myself. I have spent many periods of my life alone, and so, like anyone, I've found a way to experience a sense of community, belonging, whatever, with anime, with fiction, with movies, and such. And I believe that what Christmas offers us, just like anime does, is that feeling of belonging, that it is the season, this is the anime, it's this time of the week, particularly for those of us who are not unfamiliar with that weekly grind of waiting for our favorite anime to come out, perhaps watching the other episodes that we don't really care about of other shows just to make sure that we don't miss 1 second of the show that we really want to see. I think that in many ways that is similar to the kind of anticipation that a child, or at least that I felt, before Christmas and leading up to it. And I, for the most part, came from a low-income household myself. So it's not like I had Power Wheels waiting for me on Christmas morning or anything like that. But there is just a certain sense of that joy of waking up in the case of Christmas, or oftentimes, and even in the case of, for example, Saturday morning cartoons and anime, and having that new experience, this new things, what is it going to be? Because particularly when I was younger, the internet wasn't as well developed that you would see the Wikipedia synopsis however far in advance, and we were always watching it as it first came out. And there was no knowing 3 seasons in advance what was going on, because the Japanese version was so much farther ahead, or at least nobody had created a board or anything where you could view such information, or at least not readily. And just that sense of newness, that sense of belonging, that sense of excitement, a genuine excitement that one could feel back then. And I believe that oftentimes, particularly with how busy the world is now, that it's hard for us to get back in touch with that, or at least it is hard for me to get back in touch with that. And particularly over the last year, I've been trying to develop my ability to appreciate things in the sense of not getting burned out, because I'm very much a grind-focused person. I want to be successful. That is my goal. I don't have a family to try to support. I don't have a huge community or a huge cultural sense of obligation, and so it is mostly just about making my passions my professions and making my professions profitable. And that does mean that success brings a great deal of joy to me when it does happen, but I'm also very much a long-term thinker. And so for me, when I achieve a short-term goal, I'm not naturally inclined to appreciate it, to feel gratitude for it. And it's the same thing as, I suppose, getting socks when you're a child for Christmas. And then you get older and it seems like you never have enough socks, so you're waiting for more socks, but now nobody wants to get them for you for some reason. Sorry, a little bit of Christmas venting. And so for me, it's also a return to that ability to appreciate things as much as we used to, when it seemed that the world was colored in such vibrant paint almost. And if I'm just a little disconnected from you in this case, I apologize. It's, again, this is an unscripted sort of video. Just trying to share what I can that I believe might be of value to you as well. And I think that the notion of gratitude and appreciation on Christmas that we're encouraged to have is something that I believe is also taught in anime. Because in anime, because relationships only falter due to hopefully well thought out plot lines, and for good reasons rather than obnoxious things that happen in real life. Relationships have significance, people have significance, the objects have significance, traditions, everything. There's always a meaning behind something because it has to. They only have you for about 22 minutes, so everything needs to have significance. And it's the same thing with Christmas, isn't it? Whether it's presents, or being able to see someone that you don't often see, or having an excuse to not have to hate someone. Which, I'm sure with people's families, it's not quite so simple. But to be taken back, if a bit forcefully, to that notion of appreciation is, again, I think, very important aspect of both Christmas and anime, because it teaches us to stop treating everything so disposably, so exchangeable, replaceable with everything else. It's not just another video, it's not just another game, video, and anything. It's supposed to have value. And in anime, because you'll have those heart-wrenching moments when a favorite character dies, you do get that sense of time passing and loss. And it teaches you to appreciate something because you don't have it anymore. And of course, you can go back in time, at least chronologically in the show, but moving forward through that show, you've lost it forever. And I think that is also similar to how things go with real life. Because, unfortunately, we lose things from one Christmas to another, don't we? We lose people, we lose our... people call them pets, but I consider the animals that I've grown up with, they're just another form of family to me. That's what it means. You know, we lose those things, we lose the environment. Perhaps it's a different house. Maybe we don't have the same friends because we live in a new location. Or maybe the neighborhood's changed, and every year there's maybe a storefront that you used to get your food from that no longer is even open. These are very real things that, because Christmas only comes once a year, I believe it really does serve to end put a bookmark almost. It's like a new chapter, really. It's a solid annual reminder that this is how things are now. And if you don't learn to appreciate what you have this Christmas, you may not have time to learn for the next one. So that's another lesson and connection I have seen or made, whatever you want to call it, between and from Christmas and anime. A third thing that occurs to me is the belonging. I mean, I glanced over this briefly. I'm trying not to repeat myself since, like I said, this is unscripted. But the thing about Christmas is that, like many other holidays, you're supposed to celebrate it with your family, and it's supposed to be this big occasion. And there are many people who do have that experience, and then there are others who don't really see their family, or whose relatives do not deserve the title. And you end up spending your Christmas alone. That's just the simple reality of it. It's the same thing as Valentine's Day. I've never personally been in a relationship on Valentine's Day, so for me it's always been Singles Awareness Day, or whatever it is that people call it. I didn't even know that was a thing, but I certainly experienced it. And I believe that's much the same thing for Christmas, is that if you're spending it alone, eating pre-made meal rather than, the home-cooked meal and everything that people talk about, and watching the wonderful Christmas movies and such, you're made to be aware that is missing. And while we can lie to the world that we don't care, it's hard not to, isn't it? It's hard not to care, on the inside at least, even if you won't share it with others, because, well, evidently you don't feel like there's anybody else that will listen, because otherwise you would be spending it with someone else after all. And that also, I believe, goes into a big part of what makes it easy to really get into anime, is that it does give you that sense that you have this family. You belong in this world. You're invested in it. Fan fiction is not so abundant with anime for no reason. Now, granted, part of it is because the Japanese love to tease us with ambiguous endings, as well as other just gray areas, vague aspects that allows us to use our imaginations for it, but also to wonder and always want more. At least that's been my personal experience. And I think that sense of, not mystery, but that belonging, that those smooth strokes that you experience when relating anime to your life, is that many of us have used it or do use it as a stand-in for real relationships, for people that just aren't up to snuff to replace them. And that's also a challenge that I've found, because since, as I mentioned earlier, I've mostly just raised myself on fiction, particularly in anime, you have a lot of very loyal, understandable, well-meaning people. And it's kind of really what I think a lot of fiction is about anyway, is showing us the ideal, or kind of the archetype of something, because that's what we want. You don't want to be in a relationship with someone who's going to cheat on you. You don't want a friend who's going to run away when you need them. But the real world, unfortunately, will disappoint us compared to fiction. And I believe that's a big reason why it can be hard to break away. For example, if you're very much a recluse. Because if something isn't as good as what you've already got, why would you give it up? And yes, your waifu in the anime is not real, in quotes. I mean, in 1,000 years, who's going to be more real than any other fictional character? You can't touch them, they can't really be there for you, but they're as much for you as any other fictional character, or even any dead person from whom you take inspiration and a sense of camaraderie. So when you go out into the real world and people just don't, they're not as entertaining, they're not as well-meaning, they're not as honest, they're not as this, as that, as whatever, it's so easy to just go back to the fiction. To go back into that cocoon of how things should be, or at least to a place where it makes sense. That's something that I very much struggled with when I was younger, is that I could see that the people around me, they weren't worth my time. And particularly when you have a series of similar experiences when you're younger, it's easy to generalize that to everyone. So if the first 3 girls that you had crushes on didn't notice you, or didn't care, or they were mean, or whatever it is, a bad experience, then you could think that that's how all women are. But not in fiction, not in anime. And in anime, they're cute, but they're also strong, and they get attracted to you for very strange reasons that don't happen in real life, or at least don't translate directly to it. It's nice to have that sense of understanding and how things should be. And I think that goes well with Christmas as well, is that people should be like this all year, shouldn't they? But we're not. And so it's easy to get embroiled in how things should be. It's very much the other side of the coin of what I mentioned at the beginning, of acting towards others the way you feel things should be, of getting that sense of this is the belonging and everything. It's the dark side of that, where you don't want to go out into the rest of the world, and unfortunately, we don't live in that 2D cell animated whatever. Well, I guess it's not cell animated. Whatever. Unscripted. Leave me alone. And it is part of the reason why I've decided to make this channel more than just what-if scenarios, because, I mean, admittedly, I just get bored by doing the same thing over and over again, but YouTube, you need to niche down, so Anime Rewrite, rewriting both fiction and reality with the power of fiction. TM. And it is an aspiration of mine that as the channel grows and as we have more comrades with us, that this channel can serve as not only entertainment, but a place to... I don't know if connect would be the right word, as YouTube comment sections often seem to be more of a place to be divided rather than connected, but perhaps I've just been to the wrong locations. You never know. But I would like for it to be something that you can use in your very real life as a resource and as inspiration and as an outlet, so that you don't feel the need to live only in fiction. Because it's a very dangerous, very slippery slope. It's much like an addiction to porn, really, because just watching anime or movies or whatever doesn't really have a direct negative result. It's not like you're bungee jumping and your cord snaps and you're just dead. It reminds me of a quote, that the chains of habit are too light to be felt until they're too heavy to be broken. You just get used to it, and it gets very comforting, and there's always something else to look for, because I appreciate anime, and I love anime, but I wouldn't know where to start if I was just looking for new anime. Usually I just come across one, or someone introduces me to it, or I've heard about it before and I look into it. There's so many anime out there. I don't know how many of you keep up with it all. It's just astounding to me. So there's always more to consume. And because the women aren't standoffish, and because the men are handsome, and because people are true, and sooner or later the earnest fellow or dame, I don't know if there's a feminine version of fellow, whatever, doesn't matter, because they usually pull through. It's so easy to just spend all your time there. It brings me into a determination that I made when I was younger to be worthy of the characters that inspired me. I was like many other people, is that I had my man crushes and my actual female crushes, in my case. I had the men that I wanted to be like. The ones that were the epitome of my ideal self. And then I had the females that I liked. In my case, I was very much attracted to Diva from Blood Plus when I was younger. And I would write these stories, and I would think about these scenarios and whatever, but I've never really been able to lie to myself. If I tried to, I would always just get sprung out of it. And so, as I would think about meeting this character and talking to them and getting to know them, I couldn't help but think, this person who's either lived hundreds of years or can do all these insane things, could they stand being in the same room as me? I was on the very thin end of the typical nerd or weeaboo, whatever it is, spectrum, rather than the more heavy-set one. And I would see these anime characters who would have maybe, a slightly more built look to them, who could lift cars and cut buildings in half. You know how it works. And I made the decision that if I ever met these people, and it wasn't just anime, it was video games and movies and such as well, that I wouldn't want to feel like a loser. I would want them to continue wanting to spend time with me. I wouldn't want them to only be talking to me because I'm the one thinking of the scenario. If they were real, would they want to associate with me? And that is what made me want to start living up to that model, that perfection. And that is why I went from not exercising at all to, for the most part, exercising for the last, wow, it's too many years. I'm not saying how many years it was. I feel old now. The point being, it made me want to be a better version of myself, or not even the better version of myself, the version of myself that I knew I was at my core, and I just needed to express it in the real world. It's like a character creator. You don't create a character that is nothing like what you want to be. at least not on the first playthrough, you make them look like your ideal self, or your ideal self given the preset options or your creative limitations when it comes to sculpting their noses and faces. I chose the presets. I was horrible when it came to the more specific character creators in like The Sims and other video games and such. And I think that also connects back into Christmas. It is Christmas when I'm recording this and uploading it, after all, where it's easy to get embroiled in the fiction and you want to express, again, the way that you ideally could be, but you have to be very careful with balancing out indulging in it so that you can get a sense of this is how things should be, so that you can recover and just relax. And also not going too far, because would you want to be on the naughty list? No. And I mean the naughty list as in lump of coal, not naughty as in... Yeah, stop looking at hentai while you're listening to this. I'm not trying to give you a background, actually, you probably aren't. I don't know what's going on right now, but I'm going to leave it in because it's suitably awkward and I would probably find it amusing if I was watching/listening to this. But, being at about 40 minutes, I feel like I'm probably outstaying my welcome anyway, and if you have been listening this far, I do appreciate it. I hope that some of this has been relevant to you as well. I've really not had a point, really, for this, aside from just wanting to provide someone who, maybe you're watching this now, or maybe you're watching this who knows how many years later. That's one of the magical things about YouTube, is that it's evergreen. And I know that I've personally watched videos that were gone, and maybe one of the only 7 videos of someone who uploaded it 4 years ago and they haven't done a thing since then. And you never know what your video will be for someone else. You never know what it will amount to. Because as the creator, you just know what you experience, what you put into it. You don't necessarily know what someone else is going to get out of it. I mean, that's the thing about art of any form. And that's why, when it comes to Christmas, people can get angry as, oh, it's don't say Christmas, not everybody's a Christian. I'm not religious in any way. And I've never really had the money to buy presents. Presents as in, you know, the big presents and whatnot. But I know what it's like to make someone a handmade Christmas card. I know what it's like to try and appreciate the time that you have with that. To enjoy just the raw nature of the experience. And I think that that is another thing that we could learn. Uh-oh, he found another topic to talk about. The thing that we can learn from both Christmas and from anime is to stop looking at what divides us and think about what joins us, what unifies us, what we have in common. There's so many little lines in the sand that people are drawing now, whether it's the sort of black versus blue kind of idea, male versus female, female this, female that, trans this, trans that, and everything. And I'm not saying that anybody should not try to change the world to be better for how they think it should be. I mean, that's part of what the channel is all about, is rewriting your story to be the way that you feel it should be. But at the end of the day, if we would stop drawing all these lines in the sand and just treat each other the way that in Christmas and anime, you know, in the ideal forms, then we wouldn't have to worry about any of this crap anyway. It wouldn't matter what gender you say you are, because no one would judge you as not being what they thought you should be. it wouldn't matter that you're not celebrating this holiday for this reason, because you're celebrating something and it means something to you, and people would appreciate that it means something to you, and not be a bunch of... There were just so many different words. I wouldn't even know what to use to describe the people in that case. So, a lesson, and this wasn't meant to be a preach session, it's more so just what I've gotten out of it than anything else. From Christmas and anime is, try to focus on what joins you to someone else, not on what divides you. Think of the characters in the Christmas movies and tales and in anime who've had to work with people that they would sooner, depending on the storyline, either have nothing to do with or kill. Really. And putting your differences aside to join together and be stronger than what you were before. And this applies even more so if you struggle with social interaction, of getting out of your own head and getting out of anime, out of stories and whatnot, and having a life in this physical world of ours as well. Because it is very, very easy to get discouraged when you don't have a support system, when you don't have friends to help you. And it is also a different matter to have friends online and friends in your physical world. Because again, there's still that very distant aspect of the support. Even if you're FaceTiming or something, they aren't there. They can't hug you. And this isn't to say that they're lesser friends for it or anything like that. That's its own idea. It's its own topic to be addressed by maybe me, maybe somebody else at a future point. You need to have that personal connection with people, even if it's just one person, because words, music, fiction, there is a certain part of what we need as people that none of it can replace compared to a simple hug. There's just something about it. And there's something about a simple hug that doesn't match up to the rest of that either. But you just be aware. And no, that sounds preachy. I have personally found that as I met people who were worth meeting, my standards are high. I certainly understand not just wanting to befriend everyone you meet, because at least in my experience there have been plenty who were not worth it, so don't take this as an advocacy for just being a yes man or yes woman, gal, alien. I don't know all the gender neutral terms, and I'm not interested in learning them. A yes person. There we go. Unless you identify as a species. I don't know enough about these things. I'm going to stop talking about that now before I further anger someone who might have been getting something positive out of this. Again, it's all about not dividing yourselves from others. You see the danger. It's so easy to fall back into it. It is important. At least I have found it important for me to use anime not as a crutch, or rather, you could use it as a crutch. There are times when there's a reason the crutches exist. There are times when you do need a crutch, but to not use it as a lifelong crutch. If you break your leg, assuming that it heals properly, you use the crutches for a certain length of time, and then eventually you don't. If you use them for the rest of your life, that leg may very well not be able to walk the way that it used to be, because you never get it a chance to. Give it a chance to. Give it a chance to. Well, a mistake turned into a declaration. So, while I am all for using anime, all for one, sorry. I had a My Hero Academia flashback for a moment. I'm all for using it as a place to get the sense of how things should be. All for an aspiration, for a model, and for those emotional moments that really makes you feel like doing what it takes to be the best person you possibly can. You also have to, no. I have also found it to be important that I apply it in my real life, because I personally have always wanted to be able to be ready. If the void between fiction and reality opened up in front of me, and my most inspiring characters dropped in front of me and stood up and looked at me, being able to stand, look them in the eye, and meet them as an equal, or as at least as much as we physically can as human beings, rather than whatever fictional version of it they may be. And so I suppose the overarching idea of this video, and man, I could just do a bunch of anime expoundations. Expoundation isn't a word. I don't know. Connections, diatribes, whatever you want to do. Rant is probably the most appropriate word. And, rack up my view time. Turns out that maybe one person has watched this whole length, but even if that is true, I do appreciate you. Because, again, this is all about helping individuals. It's about helping you, which is why I try to correct myself every time I say, do this, do that, because I'm very tough on myself, but I know that not everybody responds positively to that kind of intensity. And again, I do want to help rather than harm. Unless I don't like someone, in which case I very much want to harm them, which I find to be perfectly legitimate. But don't harm anybody on Christmas, because Santa is watching, and he is reading his lists, and he is checking it twice, and he will know if you are naughty or nice. And whether you are watching this the day that I recorded it, the day of the year that I recorded it, the season of the year that I recorded it, or even if it's the middle of summer, I just want you to know that I understand the isolation that can be felt, and the pain and the hopelessness and such. Simply because the world around us isn't the way that it ought to be does not mean that we have the excuse or the right to give up on it, on ourselves, on others. The most inspiring anime characters have always found a way to push through the way things are in order to force it to be the way things should be. There is value in everything that we do, everything that you do. And I don't personally believe in karma or anything like that. I believe in statistics. If you work hard on things, then you just increase your chances of becoming successful. And you might as well do that, if that's what you want. But I have found it to be very valuable to always be aware of what I'm allowing myself to think, to feel, to dwell on. And if you get nothing else from this video, I wholeheartedly encourage you to make a point of appreciating the things that you do appreciate. Don't try to force it. It's a waste of time. You don't have an obligation to appreciate anything that you don't. Just please try to be aware of what it is you do appreciate so that you can feel that sense of gratitude, so you can feel connected to it. Just remember that while it may sometimes feel like you are alone, it's just a matter of distance between those who are like you and yourself. And there is always something that you can do. And that is what Christmas, I believe, and anime is ultimately about. Being the way that we may tell ourselves we will be tomorrow, today. And that is the motto of Anime Rewrite, is the motto of every project that I do engage in, and it is my personal motto. Tomorrow, today. Because the world needs to change. And it won't change if we don't make it change. So be today who you wish yourself to be tomorrow. If you ever met all of these characters that have meant so much to you. So that you can meet them as equals. And have a Merry Christmas together. Thank you for making history with me.